Have you ever felt paralyzed by fear, even after starting something in faith? Have you taken the first step, believing it would all work out, only to be overtaken by doubt halfway through? Sometimes, courage moves us to begin, but fear tries to convince us to stop. And it's precisely in that quiet moment, before the day really begins, when everything is still and the soul can hear more clearly, that the first prayer becomes the anchor of our faith. When we say in prayer, "Lord, I don't know how today will go, but I trust you will walk with me," we're handing over the steering wheel of our journey to the one who has never lost control. There is a deep power in that surrender, a silent peace that defies the chaos trying to form. That is the kind of courage that doesn't come from the absence of fear, but from the presence of God. There's a scene in Scripture that reveals this truth in a powerful way. Peter, an ordinary man, sees Jesus walking on water. The impossible moves before his eyes, and faith invites him to step out of the boat. And he does. With a heart full of trust, he steps onto the water, defying the laws of nature and reason. But then, he notices the wind. He becomes aware of the storm around him, and that awareness changes everything. Fear enters the space that faith once filled, and Peter begins to sink. He had started with courage, but was overcome by what his eyes saw and what his heart feared. How often do we live through the very same pattern? We begin a journey with excitement, moved by a nearly innocent confidence, until the waves rise, the wind howls, and what once felt certain begins to unravel. Fears appear. The fear of not being enough, the fear of failing, the fear of losing control, the fear of not being able to keep going. And suddenly, what once felt possible now seems too risky. But courage, contrary to what many believe, is not the absence of fear. Courage is a decision. It's standing firm even when you're trembling. It's moving forward even when your heart is pounding. It's saying, "I'll go because God is with me." Peter did sink, yes, but he cried out, "Lord, save me." And that one cry changed everything. It wasn't a long prayer. It wasn't a deep theological statement. It was simple, honest, desperate, and it was enough. Jesus reached out his hand, because that's what he does when fear tries to drown us. He comes, he draws near, he holds us. True faith isn't about never feeling fear. It's about knowing who to run to when fear appears. And when we place our trust in Jesus, even when everything around us is falling apart, we find a strength that doesn't make sense. We find direction. We find peace. Life's storms won't simply disappear. The waves won't stop just because we have faith. But there is one promise that transcends any circumstance. With Jesus, it is possible to walk on water. Even when everything screams for us to give up, even when the wind is too strong, his hand is extended. The secret is not in controlling the situation, but in keeping our eyes fixed on the one who never fails. Because when we look to him, we find peace. We find courage. Fear may try, but it doesn't have to win. Each morning, as we rise with God, we receive a quiet invitation to trust, to surrender, to walk. Even when the waters are deep, even when our hearts are unsure, we can move forward knowing he is with us. There are moments when fear doesn't roar loudly, but instead comes as a quiet whisper. It hides in subtle thoughts, disguised as caution, as logic, as excessive prudence. Sometimes it settles in slowly, occupying space in our minds without making noise, just slipping in between the decisions we postpone, the dreams we shelve, the prayers we avoid. And before we know it, we're living under fear's influence. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear that what God promised won't happen for us. It's in those quiet moments that we must return to the beginning, to remember the first call, that voice that once said, "Come," because that's how it started for Peter. Not with a crowd watching, not with visible guarantees, but with a voice and an invitation. Come. And Peter went, because he knew the voice. He trusted the one calling him. We know that voice too. It has called us before. It called when everything was dark and a flicker of hope appeared. It called when no one else believed, but something inside us still did. It called when we had no strength, yet somehow stood up again. And if we listen carefully, it's still calling. Amid the noise of our days, amid the racing thoughts, God still whispers, "Come, I am here." The courage to move forward even with fear is born out of intimacy with that voice. Because when we know who is calling us, even stormy waters lose their power to paralyze. When we trust who is on the other side of the invitation, we find strength to take impossible steps. And even if fear shows up, it no longer dictates the direction. The secret is in his presence. Peter didn't sink because the storm grew stronger. He sank because he shifted his gaze. When our eyes are on Jesus, even the impossible becomes solid ground. But when we look at what threatens us, we lose focus. And with it, stability. That's why every morning is a new invitation to refocus our eyes. Not on the bills, not on the news, not on the uncertainty, but on Jesus. He is the author and finisher of our faith. He's the one who begins, sustains, and completes the journey. And even when we feel tired, distracted, wounded, or weak, he remains. He doesn't give up on us. He doesn't walk away. He doesn't change. His presence is the greatest antidote to fear. His voice is the safest path when everything feels unclear. It's powerful to see how Peter, even while sinking, knew who to call out to. He didn't try to swim alone. He didn't cry out for another disciple. He didn't try to return to the boat. He cried out to Jesus, and that saved his life. Sometimes we're so used to doing everything ourselves, to appearing strong, to hiding our weaknesses, that we forget how freeing it is to simply cry out, to open our souls, to say, "I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Help me." That kind of honest prayer has more power than 1,000 rehearsed words. Because God isn't waiting for performance. He's waiting for truth, for a broken heart, for a soul that admits it needs him. And when that cry rises, something moves in heaven. His hand reaches out. His help arrives. Peace finds us in the middle of the storm. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't need to be the strongest, the most prepared, or the most confident. We just need to trust, to take one step at a time, and if necessary, to shout, "Lord, save me." Because that is the prayer that changes everything. When we recognize that fear is trying to take over, but choose to trust anyway, we become truly brave. Because true courage is this: not ignoring fear, but facing it with faith. And that faith, even if small, when placed in Jesus, becomes more than enough to carry us through. There's a place deep within us where the memory of all the times God has rescued us still lives. Sometimes we forget. Sometimes we downplay it. But he has already pulled us out so many times. He's lifted us from dark thoughts, from quiet, nights filled with tears we couldn't explain, from situations where we saw no way out. And even when we didn't ask, he cared for us. Even when we didn't notice, he was there. Fear tries to make us forget. It whispers that we're alone, that we're sinking, that it's too late. But here's a truth that must be remembered. God doesn't abandon us halfway. He doesn't call us just to leave us drifting. If he said come, he'll be right beside us until the end, even if we stumble, even if we doubt, even if we fail. Walking by faith is not a straight, perfect line. It has detours. It has pauses. It has moments where we're more dragging ourselves than moving forward. But in every step, He is with us. Even on the days we feel nothing. Even on the days when praying feels difficult. Even on the days when our faith feels too small. Fear will try to use those moments to convince us to give up. It will try to make us believe we're not worthy, not strong enough, too far gone. But God's love isn't measured by our performance. He loves us in the valley and on the mountaintop. He holds us tightly even when we let go. And in that love, we find the strength to keep going. Peter was restored. Even after sinking. Even after denying, he was restored. Because Jesus isn't shocked by our failures. He looks at the heart. He sees beyond the moment. And He knows what we are capable of when we walk with Him. It doesn't matter how many times fear has tried to stop you. It doesn't matter how many storms have made you question everything. Today, there is a new opportunity. Right now. In the silence of this morning, you can begin again. You can close your eyes and say, Lord, I'm still here. I still want to walk with You. Even with fear, I choose to trust. That simple prayer has the power to quiet the winds that scream inside us. Because the most paralyzing fear is not the one outside. It's the silent one hiding deep in the soul. The one no one sees. The one we pretend isn't there. But God sees it, and He never rejects a sincere heart. When we say, I'm tired, Lord, but I want to keep going, He renews our strength. When we confess, I'm afraid, but I trust in You, He surrounds us with peace. And when we can't even speak, when tears are all we have, He reads every drop like a prayer. Because His love is too deep to be limited to our words. He understands. He embraces. He acts. The storm may still rage outside, but our soul finds shelter. And in that shelter, fear loses its grip. Because God's presence is the only place where fear has no authority. So throughout this day, when fear tries to come close, remember, you are not alone. There is a voice calling you. There is a hand that holds you. There is a love that never fails. And that love invites you once again to trust. Even with the waves rising. Even with strong winds. Even without visible guarantees. Just trust. Because faith doesn't need certainty. It only needs surrender. What if today you decide not to let fear dictate your steps? What if, instead of running away, you choose to trust? Not because everything is resolved, but because your heart knows in whom you have believed. God never promised a life without storms. He promised constant presence. He promised that even when the waters rise, you will not be alone. He promised that His hand will always be there. And that promise is enough. Maybe right now, you're facing something no one else knows about. Maybe you went to sleep afraid and woke up with that same heaviness in your chest. Maybe you're smiling on the outside but screaming on the inside. God knows. He sees. And He cares. Your pain is not too small for His attention. Your fear is not invisible to His heart. He is watching over you. And more than that, He is with you. It is in that place of surrender, where the soul no longer tries to hide, that true healing begins. It's not when we defeat fear with our own strength, but when we admit, I can't do this alone. That's when grace enters. And when grace enters, peace replaces anxiety. Fear dissolves in the certainty that there is a God who cares, a God who sees beyond what you see, a God who is already in your tomorrow, preparing the way, a God who has already walked into the storm ahead of you and ensured it will not destroy you. Maybe nothing changes around you, but something changes within you. Faith grows, courage awakens, and fear loses control. So now, close your eyes for a moment and feel Breathe deeply. God is here. He is not far. He hears you. And more than that, He responds. In His way, in His time. But He responds. Today's courage begins with surrender. It begins when you, even afraid, take one step, then another, and another, until, before you even realize it, you are walking on water, not because the storm is gone, but because the presence of the one who never fails is holding you up. If this message touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe to the Daily Prayer channel. May the grace, love, and fellowship of God be with you every day.